Hello, hello, and welcome everybody to Arts Insights Live. I know there's a lot of conferences happening this week, so if you're joining us live, thank you. If you're watching this recording later, thank you. My name is Nagam, president of Arts Consulting Group, and I'm glad you're here with us today. For those of you who don't know, Arts Insights Live is ACG's bi-weekly series where we have candid, thoughtful conversation about what's happening across the arts and culture sector. Every other week, I say this, we don't come here with all the answers, but we come here to stay in dialogue. If you're joining us live right now, I'm going to ask you if you can drop a comment in the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. You can tell us the city or the organization if you're associated with an organization. We love always seeing who's in the room with us. Even if you're watching this recording later, please take 2 seconds and write us from where you're watching it. And also throughout today's conversation, if you have any questions or thoughts or input throughout about anything we're talking about, please write it in the chat and we'll try to bring some of those as we go. All right, with that said, today's conversation is called From Vision to Venue. So I'm betting you know what the discussion is going to be related to venue in one way or another. I think over the past several years, arts and cultural organizations have been rethinking the role of their facilities in a really fundamental way. What was once primarily a conversation about maybe square footage and construction budgets have evolved into something much broader, touching strategy, community relevance, audience experience, and even long-term sustainability. Organizations are no longer just asking what they want to build. They're asking why and how to make sure it stays relevant and adaptable well into the future. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, the intersection of strategy and space, and why it matters to bring those two things together early. So I'm really pleased to be joined by Joe Shermally, Senior Consultant at Charcoal Blue. And for those of you who don't know Charcoal Blue, they work on cultural, performing arts, entertainment, and corporate and civic projects around the world, helping organizations think deeply about how spaces function, how audiences experience them, and how facilities can support long-term artistic and organizational goals. We have partnered with Charcoal Blue on some of those facility planning projects, and we're happy to have you with us today, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Before we dive in, tell us a little bit about your role and what your team has been focused on lately.
Yeah, so Charcoal Blue is a theater and acoustics consulting firm. We're spread around the globe with offices in London and New York, Chicago, in Australia. And so we work on planning and theater design for all types of spaces, all kinds of gathering spaces, from performing arts to civic projects, like you say, education projects, across a lot of different sectors. We're right now here, I'm in Chicago, and I'm a team leader with the company as well as a theater designer. And right now we're about to open the Obama Presidential Center here in Chicago, where we were working on the auditorium and a lot of events planning across that facility. So that's a really exciting project for us here in the United States, opening right now.
It's amazing. And we've worked on a couple projects together as well. And it's always exciting to get to that phase. So as I was saying in the introduction, I mean, the sector really does seem to be in a moment of rethinking, not just renovating or expanding, but genuinely questioning what is a cultural facility what a cultural facility should do or be. So from where you sit, what are the most significant shifts you're seeing in how organizations approach these projects today?
Yeah, I think that we're finding that as organizations are looking to maximize their spaces, there's a lot of talk about not just what is the art that it can produce, but how can they engage with audiences more holistically at more times, in across more age groups and in different ways. So spaces are they're looking for space to host community groups, to host to have rentals, to have coffee shops, to have people just engaging in the room and in the building throughout the day, and trying to activate those spaces more continuously. And then as a result, those buildings need to become more capable and more flexible, and the organizations need to understand how they're going to manage all of those parts and pieces to keep those buildings activated. We're just asking buildings to do more, and in rooms to do more types of things rather than
Mhm.
trying to be specialists in a whole bunch of things at the same time rather than general
Right.
spaces.
Yeah, I mean, and they're also looking to serving, I mean, you said that more people in more ways. Um, is that, I mean, what I'm seeing is not just, I mean, there is aesthetic shift. Last Arts Insight, we hosted one of our clients, the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and we were talking about the glass and the feel aesthetically of inclusivity and all that. But it seems like there's a demand for a fundamentally different planning process too, more than just the aesthetics as well.
Yeah, I think people want their buildings to feel like they are part of the community. That there fewer buildings are sort of the grand opera house in the middle of town. It's they're a community center where people can enter. So
Mhm.
it affects how lobby spaces are planned and how the building presents itself on the street. How much outdoor space are you giving over to 24/7 use by the public? How do you invite people in throughout the day and throughout the year? And how do artists enter? How do staff enter? All of these questions of welcome
Mhm.
are part of that planning process, and definitely results in a shift in how we lay the buildings out, how we imagine them presenting themselves in a community, so that they do invite people in.
Yeah, and I know with our projects and together, we look at like also this strategy with the design. So like now the facility projects are not just design conversation, but there's operational conversations that we've had with clients, strategic conversations, community conversations, even speaking with the community who will be using this facility. Why do you think that shift is happening now? And do you think it's sticking?
Well, I think people want to make sure that they're uh, spending their resources in a way that's best going to support their needs today and the needs that they want to grow into. And so trying to plan the programming and community engagement alongside the planning for the building so that you can have those things talking to each other, rather than sequencing your business model and then building a building to match it. You're finding out, what do people want, what do people going to make the most use of, and how can we build the best, most efficient, most effective building to suit all of those needs. And there's a lot of iteration in that
Mhm.
process, talking outside the team, talking inside your team, and then talking with your designers to sort of make that work all together to best effect. And it takes time. And
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a great and then I think that's the key for our partnerships when we do projects. I mean, we often come to projects from a strategic planning standpoint or business modeling or operational modeling or needs assessment or even organizational development based on the staffing and all that. And then Charcoal Blue is deep in thinking about the space itself and what is the needs assessment from that aspect. I mean, you started touching on it a little bit, but is there any like how do you see the two perspectives strengthening each other in actual projects that you've done? Like how does it? And I know there's a lot of iterations, and we keep re looking at things and adjusting based on what we're learning. But is there two or three takeaways that you've seen based on experience on how those two coming together have strengthened specific projects when working together on that from the beginning? Because there are
yeah,
projects also where they have the operational model by itself and then the design is happening by itself separately. But when we do that together from the beginning, are there any
yeah.
specific strengthening?
I definitely think it's helpful to be able to feed into each other, because um, we can't always, as the designers of the building, make those clear determinations as to what is a financially or operationally feasible flexibility of a space or management of time, or does the organization's staffing provide that level of support to a space that might need to be doing many things from week to week? And so if we can be working with strategic planning, with operational modeling at the same time, to be sure that a space as complex as, say, we designed the Yard for Chicago Shakespeare, and there was it's a very heavily flexible theater, and there was a lot of operational modeling that went into understanding like how would they use that space, and how often would they be able to afford changing the space over. And so being able to and what is the revenue then that is generated to sort of justify that functionality. And so being able to go back and forth on these ideas, and we can see needs that are presented in the strategic planning and say, oh, well, this means we could do this and this, rather than having two separate spaces for these things, because they're clearly related but not overlapping. So I think there's always benefit to being able to run those processes in parallel rather than sequencing them.
Which brings me to my next question. We've both worked with organizations that arrive at a project with a clear and ambitious vision, but sometimes without full visibility on what the vision will actually require operationally and financially, to your point earlier. What are some of the biggest blind spots you tend to see early in the process?
I think that when an organization is looking to sort of grow their programming or expand, add new programming, that's always going to necessarily mean that in the future you're going to need more support to engage with that and to carry that load from the staffing perspective. And so it can be a challenge sometimes from a design team of how do we design a building for people that aren't yet there to use it. And so having the support on the client side to understand, like, what does this really mean when we get in there day to day, to move these objects around, or how does this technology work, and having those partners on the client side to really give good advice to us as well on feedback on the proposals that we make. We come with our expertise to design those spaces, but there's lots of different ways you can build out a building. And so making sure that clients have the right support on their side to make decisions that are relevant to their organization and their location can be a challenge sometimes, because then those staff get hired 6 months before opening, and they're asking questions of, well, why'd you do it this way? So that can be, and that's part of that sort of operational planning, that you make sure that you have the expertise all the way down to hands-on managers of the space to really advise on how the operations need to function.
Yeah, we see that challenge also. I mean, it's related if how deeply a facility really shapes organizational culture over time. And organizations don't always anticipate how much the building itself will influence how they work and how audiences experience it, but also what programming becomes possible based on the resourcing and the staffing and all of that. We spoke a little, like, are the blind spots different from when an organization is trying to renovate an existing building, or when they're trying to build something from scratch? Are there any different blind spots that they should think about before they start their planning projects?
I would say in both cases, sort of having an open mind of knowing what you've done. Excuse me.
All good.
Knowing what you've done that works for you in the past, and what you want to hold on to, but also having an open mind that there may be new ways of getting through challenges and new ways of tackling problems, especially when you're moving into a new facility, that it happens on projects at some level, no matter what you do, that you sort of bring along idiosyncrasies from a previous building into a brand new building, because that's the way it's always been done. And but having an open mind of really investigating what is the best way to do those things. Um, from scratch sometimes, that you do want to, your company culture is important, number one, and we want to be designing that building that really embodies that company culture. But what is important about that company culture, and making sure that we're clear on what the guiding lights of that design work are, related to how people are interacting, which people are interacting on the daily, like based on where they are in the building, but not building in things that you didn't realize weren't functional. They were
Mhm.
just the way they were, and so having an opportunity to reassess all of the goods and bads about your current situation, and saying like, yeah, we thought that that was right, but actually maybe this adjustment might improve how we associate with each other internally, or how
Right.
we can access what how we speak to the public, or how we engage with our patrons. So I
Mhm.
think um, it's great to always have an open mind through those early planning processes, so to know who you are as an organization, and what the main goals are. But those goals can be kind of about how it feels to be there, and how people want to what people want to come away with,
Right.
and we can find the best solutions to make those things happen.
Have you had any experiences where who we are as an organization evolved in the planning process based on the space? Um, it's okay if not. I was just curious when you were talking. I was like, oh, that's interesting because we can sometimes. I mean, the space impacts or influences who we are, and who we are influences the planning of the space. But as you were talking, I was just curious if there's
Yeah, I
things
think
when it comes to.
because, a lot of building projects come out of a need that has arisen in an organization,
Right.
and that that need is usually not fulfilled in your current building situation, and
Right.
like whatever your facilities are. There's You're facing a a need to support a program better, and once you do support that program better, suddenly that program has more breadth, has more space to grow, has more importance maybe in the organization. And so um, there's going to be a readjustment, a rebalancing. Um,
Mhm.
I sort of think about like the Steppenwolf organization, the organization that we built the new ensemble theater for, but part of that project was a whole fourth floor of education spaces for their teen program.
Mhm.
And their teen program was kind of wedged into other rooms previously, and now it has a whole floor to itself, so the importance of that program whole within the facility physically, but also in the organization, can now grow, and then that culture will shift around it. But those some of those things are hard to anticipate.
Yeah, no, definitely. If you're joining us now, just recap that we're talking a little bit about spaces, facilities, facility planning, and how does it look like today, and the different factors that influence it. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to put them on the chat, and we'll try to get to them today. If you're watching this later, also put your comments or questions, and we'll answer you on the chat rather than live. Um, One of the things I've genuinely appreciated in the work we've done together is the balance between ambition and practicality in a way. I mean, helping organizations still dream big and have the vision, and actually saying, well, why not? And pushing them that way. And then also balancing that with the practicality and grounding those dreams in operational and financial reality. How do you approach that balance with clients?
I think we want to hear all the ideas when we start. I think we come in with few preconceived notions about um, who you are and who you should be, and we just want to, and we try to be a blank slate to receive all of that information from the organization, from top to bottom, as much as we can. Like, we want to hear
Mhm.
all the, because I mean, good ideas come from all parts of an organization, and I think it's not until you go through a planning process like this that you actually give folks in an organization the opportunity to speak those out loud. And I think it's really vital, and it gives us a chance to then go back and look at that that word map of things, of ideas, and see how those can best match your real physical needs, your programming needs, and your mission and your vision, and how can we take all of those big ideas and um, bring back the things that we think are really resonating with across the organization, um,
Stakeholders,
across your stakeholders. Yeah, exactly. So
community. I know
I
sometimes
think just
people don't.
starting really open and um, without holding back, and then
Mhm,
being able to see what sticks. And I think certain ideas that seemed sort of unimportant, or like big dreams that were sort of pipe dreams, over time rise up as people hear them. They're like, oh wait, actually no, that is important, and we haven't talked about it enough. And some of those ideas rise up and become some of the guiding lights in a project. And while others might, as everybody talks them through, something that seemed important might actually fade into the background. So I think having an open mind at the beginning is always really important.
mhm. And I think sometimes we support even by sequencing the idea. So it doesn't mean I mean, yeah, some ideas fall throughout the process, but there are some ideas that, like, no, they're possible, but you need to do those 5 things first to get
Mhm,
to
mhm.
that vision. And it also helps with a roadmap and sequencing because it's like organizing the path to there. That sometimes hard to do for organization internally because it's like you're so close to it, but
Yeah,
it's easier for us to come from an objective standpoint as an external with the understanding the context and the culture of the organization, being able to point at things that might be not very visible or obvious for people who are in it every day.
yeah.
And then I think also, like, I think with us two together, I think we come from at it from different lenses. So I know in a project that we were working together, uh, Joe and I, and we had team members from both of our teams, were at meetings with the different stakeholders. But then we had a whole meeting with the 4 of us just digesting everything, but also bringing what does that mean and what are we hearing and how does that impact the planning from different lenses? Because we look
Mm.
at it from more the organizational sustainability in like the programming and their vision and their mission and all that. And then you're also bringing that specific things that need to happen with the design or the sound system or like all that technical lens on it, and together it forms a kind of bigger or more clear picture.
Yeah, I think a lot of our job for both of us, and especially together in early stages, is to um, take that massive information that may not be well structured from every part of the team, and to reflect it back in a way that does have clarity, that does bring focus to the things that will affect your short-term needs or your long-term goals, and
Mhm.
how we can also parse those things out into ways that are manageable in terms of an organization's capacity. Not everything has to be done at once. Not everything has to be, but how can we design your building and your operations that will allow it to grow? We hear that you need these things in the next 2 years, and we hear that you need these other things maybe 5 to 10 years from now, and we can design around those goals, and structure organizational growth for that,
Right.
to achieve that as well.
We have somebody that's watching that said if there's any interesting, I mean, more like any insights when it comes to facilities owned by local or state governments. I don't know, from planning processes. I mean, they say management models, but as we're talking about planning, facilities planning, were there any differences that come up for you when you're working with those types of facilities, or is the process the same?
Yeah, I think there is, because there's a different set of, you have an added layer of stakeholders when the organization that's operating the venue is not the organization that owns the venue.
Right.
And that can be true at a lot of different scales. That could be true in a university too, and the department that runs the theater department that actually produces the plays versus the university that owns the building. And I think that getting everybody on the same page and trying to work out what those responsibilities are to separate parties, and have really clear language around what the goals are and who's responsible for those different goals. And it can be, and that way you can get buy-in from your local government that may own your building. Why are you doing this? Who is it for? And how can improvements to a facility, to a civic facility, then drive civic engagement, and how are taxpayer dollars being used well? I think that's an important process that we certainly helped on a lot of different projects.
Yeah, and I think, we spoke earlier, you spoke about involving the different voices, whether the people who work in the organization, but even like strategists or community stakeholders, the board leaders. And in that case, even the university, key people, or the city key people, involving them early in the process, first to hear their perspective,
Yeah.
and where do they see that and the vision, and to share where we're at in the project, because that builds buy-in. But also there might be something that they're thinking of that you're not thinking of, and you don't want to finish the planning, and then when you're presenting it for approval, like we didn't, then you're hearing their opinion in a way. So in that collection of data and hearing the different perspectives, that's part of the early process to build buy-in and make sure you're getting all the different angles and thoughts about the facility and the plan in a way.
Yeah, that those facilities are part of a broader context. Any performing arts and cultural facility is part of a community, of course, but when you're literally part of an organization that is responsible for a much broader context, then you want to show how you can improve that situation for everybody, and how your organization, and how this renovation or project is going to bring value beyond your walls.
I have another question. How do you balance the organization's needs versus community wants and needs for space? And while immediate and near future needs for the org may support a certain size hall or rehearsal space, but opportunities for revenue generation may support something slightly outside that scope. So have you seen that to be motivating to donors and community to engage, or any thoughts about that?
Yeah, we definitely see that on a lot of projects, both civic projects that are owned by a local or state government, or not-for-profits that are looking to get buy-in from their local municipalities by catering to more people than just their organization. I think it's a balancing act on that comes down to both the immediate financial constraints of a project, and how much additional support today and in the long term is that extra space gonna bring to your organization, and then how much there's financial support in terms of donations and support, but also just rentals and things like that. So there's a lot of considerations to weigh against, where I think that steps back into ACG's realm of expertise better than the building planners.
Yeah, and I think getting that input from the community and from the different people, whether in the organization, in the city, will help create a roadmap. Because in the report we give, we put everything that we've heard, and what is feasible and what is not, and what do you need to do. So that includes the space and the design, but it also includes all those different needs and wants that may not always all be possible from the beginning.
Yeah.
So for my last question before we wrap, for organizations that are beginning to think about a future project, whether it's a renovation or expansion or something new, but haven't yet jumped into design, or jumped into the planning process, what are the most important conversations they should be having right now?
I think the design process is always so much easier and more effective when it's guided by a real, like a strategic plan from the organization. I think the that ensuring that the organization is comfortable with their mission and their vision, whether the people that are currently running the organization inherited that mission and vision, or if they're developing a new one, and then how does that strategic plan serve those, and where does a building project fit in that strategic plan, and ensuring that the strategic plan does not end with the building project. The building project is an enabler for that strategic plan,
Right.
because then we know how to make choices. Like all of our choices become guided by that plan for where you're trying to get to.
Right.
And
Even the
those,
sequencing and everything is
yeah,
because then you have already a guide from the organization in a way.
yeah, and that can be about audience engagement. It can be about financial benchmarks that you're trying to hit. Whatever the way you've structured your strategic plan is can vary from organization to organization. But to have that structure for decision making of the logic that leads from, we're building it this way because of this goal that we're trying to achieve that meets the vision and the mission here.
Right, and the facility in that case becomes a tool
Yeah,
to achieve the goal, not the end goal by itself. I think that framing and building that logic chain, I call it, is something I wish more organizations actually heard or went through before they called even the architect. It changes everything about how the project unfolds.
yeah.
Really. Awesome. Well, Joe, thank you. This has been such a rich conversation. And I
Yeah,
think what I keep thinking and throughout this conversation is that cultural facilities are never really just about buildings. They're about organizational vision, community relevance, all those experiences that those organizations hope to create for years and decades to come. And I think based on our conversation today and your thoughts, even we always appreciate being in this conversation with leaders and colleagues across the field. For those of you who are watching, if today's conversation resonated with you, or if your organization is beginning to think about a facility project, a renovation or expansion, or even a longer term cultural planning effort, we encourage you to reach out to both the teams at ACG and Charcoal Blue. We'd love to continue the conversation. And other than that, I just want to thank you, Joe, for your time. We'll be back soon with more Arts Insights Live. We're on a bi-weekly schedule. And thank you for watching, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.